With Republicans arguing with each other over the debt talks, some Tea Party lawmakers have been reduced to attacking the president. Take a look.
President Obama, quit lying. You know darn well that if August 2nd comes and goes, there's plenty of money to pay off our debt and cover all of our Social Security obligations. Come on, President Obama, quit scaring the American people.
Joining me now is Republican Congressman Tim Huelskamp from Kansas, one of the Tea Party freshman congressmen. Congressman, do you also think the president is lying about the consequences of not raising the debt limit?
Well, for the president to suggest and worry seniors and alarm them by threatening to withhold their Social Security checks, I think that's wrong. And certainly the Department of Treasury has enough cash on hand to pay those benefits. And so, yes, I believe it's wrong for the president to threaten seniors and use them as a wedge in a political argument in Washington, D.C.
But I don't know if you could call it a threat when he was asked whether or not these checks could be paid, and he said that we would run out of money. That's not exactly a threat to give the actual fact. The fact is, if the country spends $118 billion a month more than it has and it can't borrow the money, they're going to have to pick and choose who they pay. Is that not a fact, Congressman?
No, it's a fact. On August 2nd, the Department of Treasury will have enough funds to pay those benefits. And for the president to suggest that's wrong. And we heard that today from the Social Security Administration, that the only reason those wouldn't be paid is it's a political decision by the Department of Treasury and this administration. And that doesn't help solve the problem.
Well, look at what Mr. Bernanke said. If you think the president is lying, let's see if you think Mr. Bernanke is telling the truth or lying.
Just as a matter of arithmetic, fairly soon after that date, there would have to be significant cuts in Social Security, Medicare, military pay, or some combination of those in order to avoid borrowing more money.
I mean, doesn't that concern you? And let me say this. I looked at your background. You and I obviously disagree, but you seem to be a sensitive man, adopt kids too from Haiti. You're not just a guy with no sensitivity. When you hear the head of the Federal Reserve say this, doesn't this at least concern you?
Well, I am very concerned. The spending and borrowing practices of not just the last 2 years, but the last couple decades have created a major problem. And it's run up a $14.3 trillion credit card bill. And the idea that, boy, if we could just get past August 2nd, borrow a couple trillion more dollars, that won't solve the problem. We have a spending problem in Washington, D.C., a spending and a borrowing problem. And so I know the folks across the street are all worried about, gosh, can they get to the next election if they could just borrow enough money? You know, the debate is about this. It's about the next generation. We've been spending too much, and this idea of more job-killing tax increases and more regulation somehow will put some of these 14.1 million unemployed Americans back to work. That's what I'm concerned about. So where are the jobs? Where's the economic growth?
If that is the point, then when the president said, let's deal with that for the next generation, let's talk about a big bargain, let's put it all on the table, then why did your leadership say no? And then now when you say don't just put 2 or 3 trillion here and keep going, did your leadership, Senator McConnell and them, sell you out? If that's what you want, that's what they're offering the president.
Here's the problem, Al. Here's the problem is the president talks. It's like the CBO said, you can't score speeches. There are no details. It's press conferences. We have not received a single piece of paper with any ideas from the president. It's just talking to the press.
But don't you have to meet in order to find out what he's offering? Don't you have to sit at the table to negotiate? I mean, who compromised more than Ronald Reagan? Ronald Reagan was a great compromiser, was he not? Do you think Ronald Reagan was something negative? I'm sure you admired Mr. Reagan. He raised taxes 11 times. Did you know that? I
certainly admired Ronald Reagan and still do. But when you have 806 days since the U.S. Senate hasn't even passed a budget, and you have the president that put a budget forward in January, said in April he didn't want it anymore, but we haven't even received a detail yet, it's hard to negotiate. We need to solve this problem. And the problem is this: it was created by 2.5 years of spending more than we're taking in. This is the president's problem, and I think Mr. Bernanke's problem, and I think they're starting to get desperate that the American people are saying no to raising the debt ceiling.
Your leader, your speaker, met with the president. He came back into a meeting. The president talked about a big picture, big bargain, everything on the table, and then they backed out. Now McConnell with the support of John McCain, is saying, let them go ahead and do whatever they need to do to go forward. I mean, do you feel like those that are leading you have betrayed you because you're saying things that are not in line with what they're doing now?
No, what the president actually proposed.
No, I'm not talking about the president. I'm talking about Mr. Boehner. I'm talking about Mr. McConnell. I'm talking about Mr. McCain on what they put on the table today as leaders of your party.
Well, I don't support Mr. McConnell's plan, but what I do support is finding a way to reduce spending. We have a $2.4 trillion request to raise the debt ceiling, and the president hasn't outlined a single specific cut for this year. Actually, the talk is his idea for cutting is to cut $2 billion.
He said, let's put it all on the table, including tax cuts. So you're saying that the only thing that has to be put on the table is the cuts on one side?
He refuses to put anything in writing. He has press conferences. Why doesn't he invite some folks in the freshman class up to the White House? I encourage him to do that. But the point being, this debt was created by too much spending, by 2.5 years of this administration, and a Congress for 4 years that spent $4 trillion more than they took in.
So wait a minute, I want to make sure I got this right. So he's meeting with the leadership every day, but you just said he ought to be meeting with the freshman congressman. So maybe the president should just sidestep the leadership, meet with the freshman congressman. Have y'all had a coup that I didn't hear about? I know I've been busy the last half hour. I mean, so now he shouldn't meet with the leadership. He should meet with the freshmen.
Well, he needs to put his details in writing. And the idea, on one hand, he'll tell one group a proposal. And again, I'm just hearing this second or third hand like you are. But the crux of the matter is, put your details in writing, Mr. President. Tell us how you're going to solve your problem. Because it was your spending. It was the Democrats who ran up $2.5 trillion that they need to close the gap on. And
how does a Tea Party member like you, a guy that comes out of a working and small business background, defend tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires and corporate jet guys? I mean, how can you do that and leverage that against cuts for grandmamas on Social Security? How do you do that?
Well, there's nobody on the Republican side that's proposed a Social Security cut. It's the president who announced last night that he might withhold checks to millions of seniors when there's cash on hand at the Department of Treasury. That is wrong.
How do you defend tax cuts for billionaires, millionaires, and corporate jets? That was the question. How do you defend that?
Job-killing tax increases don't put Americans back to work. We have 14.
No, we're not talking about increases. I'm asking you to answer the question. I'm not trying to cut you off, but I really want an answer to the question. How do you defend that? If you let the Bush tax cuts expire, that is not tax increases. That's expiring a tax cut.
In December, these are the tax cuts that Mr. Obama signed in December. The idea
they were
that
the Bush tax cuts extended. That's correct. If they run out,
they are the Bush-Obama tax cuts.
That's letting them run out.
They were the Bush-Obama tax cuts that were extended in December. But the point is, we have 14.1 million Americans out of work, and the idea that we can raise taxes and somehow solve this deficit problem, $1.65 trillion, it would only solve 5% of the problem.
We are not raising taxes. We're talking about letting the taxes run out. And we've seen with all of these Bush tax cuts since 2001, where are the jobs? I mean, what are we talking about? How long do we wait on the jobs?
Well, 2.5 years is too long to wait on this president to create jobs. His stimulus package promised millions of new jobs. We've lost millions of new jobs.
We've gotten 2 million jobs. 10 years of tax cuts haven't gotten us anything but a burble that burst in our face. Thank you, Congressman, and thank you for coming to the show tonight.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Mitch McConnell.